the things I want to get my other colleagues and Roger Nozaki in on as well is we continue to use the word program as a solution to a challenge where we're going to require the vast majority of our students to be successful, not a small number of them. So the implication of program is it serves a small number of people for a limited period of time. I was privileged to go to college, recruited from East Harlem, the nation's ghettos, in 1969, when all the small liberal arts institutions decided, because of the civil rights movement and assassinations, that they were going to open their doors and accept people like me with checkered academic histories. And it was an EEO program. And for 4 years, Macalester College in St. Paul, Minnesota, took 75 students from around the country and low income backgrounds. And 4 years later, it closed the program down and our numbers dwindled. And that happened everywhere, Oberlin, Antioch. So it was a program. There was a solution in a short-term way, and it got me standing before you today, but it wasn't continued and it wasn't integrated into the life of the college and university. So I want to push us to talk about how we change the culture and practice and pedagogy of the university so that programs inform the system as opposed to operate outside or alongside of it as a Band-Aid strategy. So Annie, can you share anything about that?
I'll share some thoughts on that. I have a few thoughts. One is that at Brown we have been very interested in expanding our reach to underserved populations, first-generation college students. And one of the factors that we have trouble figuring out is who is going to have difficulty? Because every time we think we've identified a population that we think will struggle, invariably those names do not show up in the end of the first year review. And it's often students who were not in that group that we identified who had difficulties. Now, it may be because we were very focused on those we felt were at risk in one way or another. And particularly it's one of the at-risk groups that we are very focused on are students of color, underrepresented students of color, African American, Latino, women, and first-generation college students going into the STEM.
Everybody.
That's everybody. Not enough of them, though. And one of there are a couple of things we've been working on. One is to have a very hardworking colleague in the dean of the college office, and he attempts to raise the awareness of faculty on kind of national research on how we influence in our teaching, how we influence men and women and their ability to succeed, and also how men and women differ in when they give up their own sense of what is success or being good enough. So there is some research that shows that women often will get a same grade as girls and boys, get a same grade in a math course. The girls think, oh, I should give up, I'm terrible at math. Boys think, that was a bad test. And they don't, I mean, it's just sort of one of those in that age span, and there's some research. So thinking about how we counsel students who, when they hit that first problem course, that exam result, counsel them not to leave engineering quite yet. The other thing that we have done is to identify faculty, and there are many who are very interested in advising and working with students who come from backgrounds similar to theirs. They were first-generation college themselves. They are of African American, Latino, again, a variety of backgrounds, but they want to also provide be role models, to be evidence that the students are in a place where we know they can succeed. And it's, I think, only been a few years that we've been working on this targeted advising and mentoring, but to some extent it seems to be helping.
Just a reaction to something. One of our challenges when thinking about educational issues is to figure out how we can bring the level of rigor of analysis that allows us to specify the category we're talking about. For example, the broad issue is we are saying we want 55% of Americans to have some post-secondary degree. The 55% rate talks about 2-year institutions and 4-year institutions. Most people don't realize that almost half of all Americans begin higher education, their higher education experience, in a community college. And there are many jobs for people at the 2-year college level. Many people haven't come to respect the fact that there are all these jobs, wonderful jobs in biotech and other areas, with the idea that one might later on go on and get a 4-year degree. So the question is, how do we get people in who can get either a 2-year or 4-year? For many students of all races, boys in particular, they're so bored, they're not going to sit there for 4 years of liberal arts. We know now that we are down to about 44% of higher education students who are male, and that's a lot of white boys, middle class, who just didn't want to be in school because they were bored, and we need to admit that first. Secondly, when thinking about these issues, it's the broad issue of a degree of some kind, and then types of institutions. The study that we completed on underrepresented minorities would say that when I talked about that bottom group who were not even at the basic level in skills, we know they are poor white kids and minority kids, heavily, first of all. Secondly, when talking about the STEM issue, though, keep this thought. Unless the student has learned to read well early on and has a strong, at least pre-calculus background, there is no possibility that that student will succeed, even in a biotech program in a community college. So the student is lost to all those possibilities of careers. Finally, the Ivies have done a wonderful job with minorities. You listen to the Bach and Bowen group and others in the social sciences, but have not. They have all the 25 institutions, the leading 25 institutions for blacks, the leading ones for Hispanic. Neither list includes one Ivy League school when talking about producing kids who will get PhDs in science or MD PhDs, not one. Now, if we extend it, this is for the natural sciences and engineering, if we extend it to the social sciences, and NSF talks about S&E, we find that Harvard and one or two other big places, Berkeley, will be in the list because the trend is the kid comes in, best in his school, he starts off in pre-med in biology, he changes to, or she changes to psychology. And not the neurosciences, but the social psychology. Then they can go in and make it. So we're making progress in the social sciences, but in the natural sciences and engineering, African Americans and Hispanics who go to Ivy League schools for undergrad school do not become PhDs. I mean, they're not even close. And that's one of the challenges when thinking about the fact that those institutions actually are getting the best prepared blacks and Hispanics in the country. When thinking about the fact that many diseases are particularly specific to populations, sickle cell anemia. It's the same issue we face when we think about prostate cancer and breast cancer. You know that until recent decades, almost all the money in Congress for cancer went to prostate cancer. Why? Because the guys were in Congress. It was only when you had scientists at NIH who were women that they could show that is as deadly as anything else. Then we began the same thing with minorities. And so the question is going to be for the best universities in our country, the most prestigious, how do we help students transform the culture at that level? And then for the K through 12, how do we make sure that we have many more students, higher percentages, just with a proficient level of reading and mathematics in the 8th grade? And right now we've accepted the fact that the majority are not proficient in most states. That's a major challenge that we face.
Let me switch from the higher ed and I'll come back to Roger, but I want to ask a question of Six here and my colleague Walter Callender. I was decent to good at math in junior high school. Almost lied and said middle school. Middle school didn't exist when I was in it was junior high school. And as I went into high school, I sorted myself out of mathematics for several reasons. One, because of the signals I got from the math teachers. But also, math was taught in such an abstract manner that I couldn't get excited about it because I had no idea what it dealt with in any way that was meaningful for me in my life, right? And in music, I could see a performance in an orchestra, and I could see what the end goal would be, which would allow me to tolerate all those lessons on the viola that made my family scream and wonder if I was doing anything right. And so, to some extent, the other disciplines there were concrete references in the society that I could point to that allowed me to tolerate the mundane basic skills acquisition that's required to become proficient and advanced. But the whole picture of what the performance was about was presented to me, but it wasn't in mathematics. It was almost shielded. It was as if you had to earn your way through the drudgery and get a PhD before we exposed to you what this was going to be good for. I don't know to this day what trigonometry is good for. I enjoyed geometry, but they said I had to go to trigonometry, and then calculus I avoided because after I got done with trigonometry, I said, I don't understand what that was about. What chance would I have at understanding what calculus is about? So I'll do something else.
The Common Core standards are supposed to give us language that's clear enough that families can understand what their kids are doing. I'll give you the perfect example of a challenge. How many of you remember something in high school called a function?
Yeah.
And you think alphabets, right? Now, here's my question. How many of you who are not a science professional or an engineer or a math major can stand now and tell me what a function means or is? How many of you can give me the definition of a function if you're not in math? This is a statement about the language we use. Think about it. And you are the educated group in America, all right? So I'll leave you saying Providence doesn't know what a function is. Just kidding. America doesn't know. Every group I've talked to, I have never had more than 5% of the people even willing to try. They just remember something about f of x equals x squared, whatever that means, right? And the point of Common Core standards is we're supposed to bring some reality to the work so that people see these connections,
right,
which we have not shown